where before they would have been going about their mundane set of business, and then the next day they just wake up dead.
I can give you guidance, but apart from the guidance, it's up to you to actually do the work.
We don't even know what your problem is, and what it really says is your problem starts here.
Okay, we are now on episode 25, according to what we've been recording so far, and we have suddenly come up with this idea that we're going to talk about problems. Or what does problem mean, and how do we address a problem? And one of the things I thought I'd just do a quick Google search to see what problems are. And a problem is a noun, apparently, a matter or situation regarded as unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with and overcome. That's one definition. Then there's the physics and mathematics version, which is an inquiry starting from given conditions to investigate or demonstrate a fact, result, or law. How does that grab you, Garvin?
Well, it's interesting, because now a problem is actually a positive and a negative. It's like Audacity. It's the petulant child and the bold Captain Kirk, going boldly where no man has gone before, or anyone else for that matter. So Captain Kirk had a bunch of problems. The problem was with the aliens, with the Starship Enterprise, will the engine go, will the crew do what they're told? But I was trying to be positive. And when I heard the word problem, before you looked up the definition, I was saying, I've got to stop coming up with the problems. I've got to stop being negative. Now, problems in business speak are the opportunities for companies to make money, in a sense of, if you can solve someone's problem for them or take this pain away, that's what people are paying for, to solve their problems or make their life easier or take the pain away. So that's the business speak of, a problem is actually an opportunity to solve. Now, on the other side, in my personal life, if you use the language of, I have a problem, you start thinking of a negative connotation of something is wrong, something is broken, something, as you said, something has to be done, something has to be addressed to solve this problem. And it may not be a good problem, and it may not even be solvable, but it's your problem because it's in front of you and you feel you've got to come up with some aspect of a solution. If it's someone else's, actually, I'm just reminded now of a little acronym which I use quite a lot in business world, and it's called SEP. Then the people ask me, what's that? And I go, it's someone else's problem. It ain't mine. So you want to know who owns the problem, who has to solve it. If it's not your problem, you can charge someone. If it's your problem, it's going to cost you. So, George.
And that was interesting because earlier on you were talking about having a conversation with someone that hadn't been given specific job parameters. They didn't know what was the scope of their job, what was their job description. So the problem that they had was that they didn't know where the demarcation lines changed into somebody else's jobs, and they didn't quite know where they fitted in. And because of that, they were creating more and more problems for themselves because they didn't quite know what the framework was that they were having to work within.
Now, the weird thing is, this is what I'm trying to say. What I was saying to that individual, and I was trying to act in a mentor coach capacity, I was saying, without you knowing what your roles and responsibilities are, what that really says is where your job starts and where it finishes. And if you go beyond the call of duty, then you'll be expecting to get recognition for that, or maybe an extra reward, or someone to be at least aware of the fact you've done more than your job was originally asking for you. That's where you normally get your bonus in sort of business speak. Now, but his problem was he didn't know what was his problems and what someone else's was. The problem was starting to happen was everyone else in the business was seeing that their problems were belonging to him. They just want the answers from him, and he's to solve all problems and all workloads to go with that. Yet he wouldn't get the recognition and reward and the responsibility that goes with that risk. So he had the risk of owning all the problems, having to come up with all the solutions, and get none of the reward, or not know where his job started and ended. So ownership of problems is very, very important in my opinion. Then you go, that person is now responsible for finding the solutions.
And the difficulty there is that if you're not quite sure what the scope of the problem is, you're not understanding necessarily how to deal with it and what part takes precedence over another. And obviously one of the first things you have to do is say, okay, there is a problem, but let's not rush in. Let's step back and look at the overall pattern of what's going on and see if we can work out and break it down into smaller little chunks that can be easily dealt with, and then sections of them delegated out to other people so that they can deal with that problem.
Great business speak, great business speak. But I'm a consultant in my alter ego life, and I'm brought in when there's a lot of problems, or the problem is they couldn't fix the problems, or most of the time is they don't know what the problem is. They know there's something wrong. They can see the evidence in the systems that something is broken. It may be, and most of the time they think it's one thing. And what you're normally looking at in business world is that's the evidence of a whole lot of other problems. You're just seeing it here. And to fix what you perceive as your problem, the answer might actually lie elsewhere in someone else's department. And most of the time it does. Because a lot of the time people are coming from a silo, seeing that something is broken here on my computer or in my reports. But where that source of that information or data was coming from was from 50 other places. And you don't know which bit is working and which bit is not working if there's no audit trail back to it. And all you're seeing is the net effect of something is broken my end. It's like a car just stops. You're going, well, you put petrol in, okay? If it's petrol, that's an easy fix. If it just stops and the warning lights are saying red, orange, and lots of flashing little things, you're going, and there's a book the size of Encyclopedia Britannica beside you going, here's 5,000 problems you could have. It's any one of the above. In the absence of bringing it to an expert, we don't even know what your problem is. And actually what it really says is your problem starts here. It's now you've got to go off and find what other problems you have to address the problem at hand.
Now, you just reminded me of a situation where I was trying to teach some students how to do either editing, I think it was actually editing, and one of the students says, well, George, why can't you just write a big book that tells me everything I need to know? And I kind of going, well, to be honest with you, until you mentioned the problem that you're now having, I had no idea what it was that we'd be trying to fix or sort out or solve. But now I can identify what that problem is. I know there's a number of different actions I can now take to quickly sort that problem out. But I wouldn't have known it unless they'd come up with it in the first place. If they hadn't been there, then I wouldn't have had a problem to solve.
Now, the strange thing is that we're back to the word problem. We're going, what's the problem? The problem with, I was thinking as I was walking up the road, I was going, the problem with something. We don't know what the something is. Is it, and we're saying, but before we're starting, we're saying, there's a problem with something. And that means there's something wrong with something, or broken about something, or not right about something. It's not a solution with, it's a problem with. And if I get rid of the problem and solve that, I'm back to status quo. There's nothing wrong with whatever we're talking about. Now, maybe that the wrong can get, there's nothing wrong, it's just things can be better. If you're content, that's all very well. You might feel you have no problems, but you might not be even aware of the fact you should have problems. And that's the problem. You're oblivious to the fact other things are coming your way, or you should have addressed something before it goes wrong, or you should have put maintenance procedures in to prevent the problem from happening. So, but if we can be blissfully unaware and content of things we shouldn't be informed about. So I'm driving my car. Actually, I remember my wife driving an old car that we had, and there was an orange amber light on the engine block dashboard, and she's been looking at it for weeks, and she said, then all of a sudden the engine blows up, and I'm going, how the hell, we have to pay $2.5 grand to replace the car nearly. And I'm going, surely there was a warning sign, surely there was something that would have put you made you aware that this might happen. And she said, well, there was an orange light on for about a month, but I didn't think there was a problem. It seemed to be on, nothing was happening, and that's fine, I'll just keep on going about my business. It wasn't red. So we didn't watch the warning signs. We didn't take action to prevent the actual problem from happening. We didn't put in a process of preventive maintenance so the shitstorm didn't arrive. So it's a little like we had to replace the car for the sake of an orange bulb and someone not mentioning the light was on. Do something about it. Turn it back off. Solve that problem.
I think what's interesting is that the mathematical solution or idea is an inquiry starting from a given condition. And there's a condition that we've suddenly, we say it's a problem. Okay, but if we take it, this is an interesting problem. Most of us, if we're filmmakers, the interesting problem is that we want to make a movie. That's the problem. That's actually, it's not negative. It's something creative. It's the same as if you want to do a painting or you want to do a piece of writing. It's trying to work out, where do we start? It's the same with doing these podcasts. Where do we start? What do we need? By sort of seeing it as something you want to do, which is what you're classing as a problem.
No, that's a language that's popped into... I have to stop using the word popped into my head. Everything pops into my head. The problem with Garvin is he keeps on saying these little sayings. And it's not a problem. It's just what I do. But I now perceive it as a little mini micro problem. And it's not. The problem I'm with is the sentence I'm now using. And I like... It can be depending on how I emphasize it. There's something wrong that needs fixing and it's broken and it's excuse me, it's going to cost me. And therefore it's a negative. Now what you just said, George, is we have this quandary. The problem is where to start. It's a good thing. Isn't it a great problem to have? Because more than likely you have a budget, you have a resource, you have a project, and you're just going, right, you just need to get the angle of approach here. And it's not a problem.
It's like a journey, because if you think about the journeys that we go on, the problem is that we know where we want to get to, but we don't quite know where to go. So we pull out a map and then we track through where we can get to. And then we also look to see what alternative routes we can get onto, just in case that first route is blocked, which we won't know until we actually go on that journey. So we have strategies for different alternative routes to actually go along. That's a positive thing. It's just
there's a nice thing as well. It's the problem with choice. Isn't it a terrible problem to have multiple choices and now have to make a decision between competing opposites? So this chap the other day had 2 job offers, and that was a problem. A lot of people out there have no job, and your problem is you don't know which one to pick. But again, people want things to be... sometimes I hate going into a supermarket with 17 tins of beans in front, because now I have to figure out which one. And it's only a tin of beans and I shouldn't even be paying attention. It's taking up my time for something that it should be simple. Just put your arm out and put the tin of beans in the basket. Don't start seeing this as a problem. I do. Now, I create problems where there are no problems. Now, we don't want to use the word problem anymore. We want to be creating solutions. We don't even want to bring up that word. There's big problems and little problems. If your problem is the world is going to end soon, and you can't solve it, and nobody can solve it, then you can dwell on the problem.
Let's just go back on that one.
Get on with living.
Yeah, let's just go back on that, because we're trying to get away with the word without, do away with the word problem. But the thing is, by actually saying, well, look, there's a problem, we're identifying where we're at this point, and then we can identify where we want to get to, and then we can work out a journey that we can go on to get from A to B. But if we can't identify the problem, which is what happened with your wife with the orange light, she didn't realize was the problem, she hadn't identified it, then she couldn't come up with a solution. So if we're always trying to come up with solutions, we may not know what it is that we're trying to solve the problem of.
And that's
do you know what I mean?
To be oblivious.
To be oblivious,
exactly.
Yeah.
If I don't know there's a problem, is there a problem? That's back to the bear doing whatever in the woods, and the tree falls and no one hears it. Did it happen? If I don't know I should have a problem, I actually do have a problem. Then there is no problem. There is. It's hidden. This is the thing about medical. I don't like the idea of going to the doctor getting a medical check, because I had no problem a second ago. If I go in there, I could come out with a death sentence. And I'm going, and that has happened to people. They felt well. They said, I just get a health check, and all of a sudden they were identified with the worst scenario you could think of. Now, is that a problem? It was still there. It was always there. They probably had a timeline from A to B, but now they're aware of it. There's nothing they can do about it, because it is inescapable. But they now are aware of the time remaining to get the most value out of, where before they would have been going about their mundane set of business, and then the next day they just wake up dead. So would you like to know, or would you rather not?
Well, the interesting thing is that there's two certainties that most people know about. One of them is that you have to pay your taxes, and the other one is that you die. You've just been talking about the dying one. And I'm now in that sort of phase of that particular part of the year where I need to get my accounts all sorted out, because if I don't get them sorted out, the next problem I'm going to have is a big bill from the tax man saying, basically, I'm fining you till you get this sorted out and tell me, so we're going to create a problem for you. So to stop that problem from actually happening, my best solution is to get my accounts all up to date and get them to the accountant. So, but there's quite
like
often
saying,
you're given two options. Which is the worst? Is it taking the pain of actually doing the accounts, or having the pain of being fined for not getting the accounts done?
It doesn't go away, as you said.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're putting things off and the never. Certain tasks have to be done. It's whether you address it first and treat it as the biggest pain, but then you get the biggest reward because that's done first, and then you move on. Now, what popped into my head there was critical path analysis. Back in the business speak is, you've got to do certain things in certain orders to get the most value and reach those targets and go on the path of least resistance. If you address the wrong set of things first, you might find so it's like the dirty pond. You swish the dirt out of the way. For that moment, you had a clean pond, and you thought you solved the problem. But you never took the dirt out of the pond. Therefore, the problem never went away. It just moved, and it's coming back. And it might come back tenfold. So sometimes a little problem, if not dealt with, becomes a big one. What you see as a little one is actually 100 ones hiding in place. Everything is net down to this little value, but it's 1 million to the positive and 999,000 to the negative. What looks like a £10 problem or €10 problem is actually two bigger problems hiding in plain sight and only being made visible in this little space. And that's where I was talking about the medical thing again. If you see a little spot, my mother has a little spot in her nose, and she's going, it looks like a freckle, and you're going, it's a spot in my nose. Now, in front of your eyes, it looks bigger because your eyes magnify it. If you look at it in terms of size, you go, it's a spot. But what it can hide is a multitude of other issues. So address a problem when it's small, just solve it as quick as possible, and then deal with the next one. If you have 100 in front of you, prioritize them and deal with the biggest one first, and the one that will lead to the more problems later. So there's always this prioritize, and at the same time deal with, because problems don't usually go away by themselves. Some do, but rarely, I think, in my opinion.
And I think that's what came to my mind was the word address, and you'd actually said it just as I was thinking about it at that particular point in time. And I think that's the key, is that quite often we put things off, and they mount and until we finally take the courage to address them. Now, the other thing that was sort of coming to my mind was this idea of being overwhelmed. And little things can seem to build up and overwhelm you, and until especially when someone first brings the problem to your attention, you suddenly kind of go, oh my God, how am I going to get that done? Because I've got this, and this. There's nowhere I can squeeze that in. And as soon as you can just get a step away from that panic, quite often, the moment you stop thinking about it, a solution comes to hand, and you suddenly can solve it very, very quickly without too much pain, and it's over
George,
and done
that's
with.
what I was trying to tell you earlier. If you had listened, my magic little acronym, SEP, is a very powerful acronym, because most of the time it is what it is.
It's someone else's problem. Yes.
And they're trying to give it to me. And if it's the hot potato, if you catch it, it's yours. Then you've got to go, if you can't chuck it at someone else, it's yours. So you've got to defend I go, hold on a second, what is this now? Now, is that my problem or your problem? And if it's your problem and not mine, well, then I might help you and point you off in your way. If I something I can help with, by all means. But if my desk is full, well, something else has to move off it to someone else. So this is the whole point of business speak. You're going, if you want me to do something and you're my boss, prioritize what you want me to do in order, and I will do it quite happily. But do not think I'm going to be cloning myself, and do not think I'm going to be doing it in the after hours or before hours, and particularly in my case, in my sleep. But be aware that not all problems are your problem, and don't take on other people's, or if you're going to make sure you are volunteering it and you know what it entails.
I mean, you're talking about business speak, but this is also in relationship speak, friends, family, the whole heap. Because one of the issues that can happen is that people, not knowing how to solve things, but know that you're good at doing that particular thing, will actually use emotional blackmail to get you to help them out. And that's where you still need to have the confidence to say no, because for the same reason, why are you asking me to do that? What's in it for me? Why should I do this? Will I get anything back in return? Because you can quite often be asked to go and constantly solve these problems for other people, and they can go off and sort of lounge around while you're trying to solve a problem. And you're kind of going, hang on, this is happening on a regular basis. We need to try and stop this. And that happens to lots of people. You've just got to find a way of saying, okay, why don't we let you sort that problem out? Then I can give you guidance, but apart from the guidance, it's up to you to actually do the work and to carry out and solve the problem. And if you can't solve the problem, then you've got to try and find a way of paying for someone to solve that problem. I think, it's the same as when we hire someone to fix our the heater, the boiler. So, those are tasks that I'm not qualified to go and do, so we need to pay for someone to come along and actually do that job for us. And if they don't do the job for us, we can always go to somebody else to go and do them as well.
Well, that's an interesting thing there now, because we must be in synchronicity or something, or maybe just the language is my boiler is just gone. And I immediately went to the Garvin space of, oh God almighty, it's only $2,000, got to replace the whole boiler. It's a big copper boiler. Can't even get someone to turn up, and never mind the cost and finding someone. Now, that isn't even the problem. The problem is can't shower. So it's the smelly family running around trying to wash themselves in a bath, like an iron bath out the back, because the problem is not, well, the money is a problem. Going, there's $2,000, I'm thinking in my head I have to spend on something I didn't have that bill a minute ago. Now I do. And I go, that money, even though I don't have it, the money I don't have, if I had it, it wouldn't be for that. It'd be for something better. And now, even before I get that, spend it, the money I don't even have, I've got to find someone to fix it. And until we find someone, and we haven't found someone, 4 days later, we're actually putting the heat on, spending on the aisle to heat the tank for the hot water. So we're putting on about 10 radiators in the house in order to heat 1 tank of water so we can shower in the interim. So this is all sparking from effectively a thermostat. So what could potentially be an hour fix if someone would just turn up with the piece of item, is creating this ripple effect of balance of aisle, timing, heat to shower 5 family members indirectly through a tank. I'm going, and never mind the psychological bill in my mind of I have to go off and earn twice that amount before tax to pay for a bloody thermostat so I can watch the dirty kids.
Well, we have a similar sort of problem that we had a boiler put in. Now, it may be 6 or 7 years ago, but unfortunately, the person that put the boiler in didn't change the flue. So the flue looks as though it's 25 years old, because that's what it is. And so what we're being told to do is to go and replace the whole system. And we're kind of going, no, we only need this bit replaced. That's all we need replaced, because the other thing is working, and we've been trying to keep it maintained over the last few years so that it will keep functioning. Why should we have to spend a lot more money on this item than, because it is functioning, when all we need is this other element? And I think that's it's a small thing that needs to be solved, but it could be made into a mountain when we don't really want it to be a mountain.
Now, I'm just about to do a bit of work on a piece of my house here, and I did one side before, and I put in all these fancy eco heaters, and it cost about $5,000 to turn on once a year. But now I'm going, the other side is the exact same size. I'm going, do I spend this? I don't have the money, but even if I did have the money, do I do it again? Because strange thing is, you could spend this $5,000 in order to be in a position to heat a couple of rooms for a couple of weeks a year, and over the next 20 years, or you can just say, look, I'll just plug a bloody heater into the rooms when someone's in it, and I'll pay 10 times the price for the hours in question, but it'll only be a few £100 versus a few thousand. Now, over 10 years, I would have been better off getting the bigger thing, but the problem to just solve the problem for the moment at the minimum cost to get over the hurdle, to get to the time you've got the spare money to address the bigger view, which is a 10, 20-year view of something whereby you will ultimately be saving over the long term. But hello, I may not be here, the kids have moved on, I could have already sold the house, I won't benefit, someone else will benefit. So in the short term, just pay the dearer bill. And then it's not a big bill, it's a small bill, and when you get fed up with that, then you're saying the answer to this is get something more efficient or invest bigger to get a payback over a longer term. And that's when you're actually doing your education or spending 3 years working a particular job, you're doing this for a reason, to get the maximum learning with a view to doing the jump, to get that benefit you've now banked in the sense of that extra career jump. An awful lot of people, including in my own case, forgot to make the jump. They done the learning and then stayed. So the thing is, are you going on the stellar path of career? Or are you staying in the comfort of, I'm paid X to take on other people's problems?
Now, one of the things that was coming to mind as we were talking through there was I started to think about a number of projects I worked on in the past, normally for other clients. And quite often you go on a first iteration of trying to do something, you're trying to solve a problem, and then it creates another little problem, and then another little problem then occurs, and then another one occurs. And before you know it, you're kind of going, right, what do I need to do to sort all that out? And sometimes what has been the greatest thing that's ever happened to me at that stage is when the computer has crashed and I've lost everything because I've had to start from scratch. But then I found that I could build the thing far quicker at that stage because I no longer had the other one to keep on thinking I needed to patch up and build upon. And I was able to just go, right, okay, I know what the problems were. So if I take this route now, and I end up with a far better piece. In your experience, Garvin, have you found that in some of the jobs you've worked for, that you've ended up going down a certain avenue that you suddenly realize, actually, what we need to do is stop, pull this apart and start again?
I love that language, but that strangely enough, and I have found, has been the hardest sell. But even though it would have cost them the least in the long term, it made the most sense. Most of the time, any company or business is seen, it's like my boiler. They're going, it's a thermostat. No, you're going to put a brand new heating system in. You forget the boiler's only shown that's just keeled over. That's the point of least resistance now. And if you put a new one of that in, it's going to break everything else. And everything else is going to be bigger. And if that happens, then it's going to cost you 20 times it. So that was when they're calling the likes of me in, and actually they're normally going on this language of a journey of transformation. They're coming from legacy space of, we used to have our Betamax version of this, and we were living that for 10 years, and our sunk costs are, we've invested that much in the past based on where we are now. We've invested millions. I go, but the language there is, that's gone. That's dead and gone. It's spent. It's Betamax. It's VHS. We're in iPhone 11. So you're going, your competitors, anyone that starts now is going straight to iPhone 11. They might even go to 13. They might leapfrog straight in and bypass the lot. That's actually what you see as your investment. They're seen as what's costing you. You're stuck. You're trying to get the value out of something that's already dead and gone. So to let go is the hardest thing, and the more bigger an organization, it was the harder to let go, because what they see as a small problem turns out to be, when we opened up the nest of vipers, it turns out this is a £10 million problem. This is not thick, but a last to pass on this thing. You've got to address this, because it's the dam. You see a little crack in a dam, you go, that's not the problem. You're not going to stick some masking tape on that thing. It says this thing is about to go. All hell is about to break loose. You need to address the elephant in the room, because he's about to go get his friends and go on a rampage. So that's what I found. By the time they brought me in, they got the other guys in that said they could solve the problem. They couldn't even identify the problem. So they were gone, I'm in, I'm a different price point, I'm going, right, are you ready to listen to what the answer is? I'm not going to sort of dress it up and call it something else. That's an elephant, it smells like an elephant, it looks like an elephant, it ain't a sheep. So do you want to address the elephant in the room, or do you want to sort of put the wool over your eyes and run away? Because if we don't address this, it's going to cause havoc. But if we do address it, then you can, like back in India, you can put a siege on top of that elephant and start riding it through. And we can use this as the weapon of war, as the means of going forward, because this elephant is now fully armored, and it's your strength instead of your problem. And that's what you need to do. You need to leapfrog, move forward, invest. And you might have to bin the past and start again. And actually, it's quicker, as you said, to build in the answers. Actually, one sentence there, I was mentoring someone there the other day, and I always used to build for all answers. Instead of trying to build the system to answer the question of today, it was to preempt the next set of questions. Because as soon as the management have asked that set of questions, they're armed to the teeth to ask the more intelligent the next set. But when they ask that set, if you didn't build in the level of detail into the system, there's nowhere to answer it, because that information doesn't exist in the system, and it was already thrown away. You have it. It's about getting things right first time. It's building to solve the questions you're going to ask in the future, not the ones you have today.
And I think that's the big issue, is that whenever anybody takes on a project, especially like a video project, people have a certain budget in mind, and they kind of go, we've got this budget and we want you to make a video. And you kind of go, right, okay, but what's the video about? What's the story you're trying to tell? And they kind of go, oh, we don't know. You're the expert. You just solve the problem. And you kind of go, well, I can't solve the problem until I know I have enough information to help me plan a project that will fit into your budget, and see what it is you can do and what we can't do within that. And when most people agree a kind of budget, they kind of expect you to keep that budget, even though they're now changing the parameters, and they kind of wonder why. Oh, hang on a second, you said you'd do it for this price, and I kind of go, yes, that was when you wanted this. Now you want this, or you want a more complicated version. That has now put the price up quite considerably, just because of those things that you want in. So are you prepared to spend the 11, 12 or 13,000, or to bring it down to something that's more manageable? Are you prepared to cut back?
Expectations for the budget at hand. You can't have the Rolls Royce for the price of a Lada. You might be able to, but it's going to be a Tonka tie. It ain't going to be real. It's going to have no engine and no wheels. But you got to have realistic expectations. So now, what I'm going to finish up on is, I just remembered my new mantra to myself. I says, I'm not going to be seen as the guy with the problems anymore. What I changed myself to be was, you come to me with your problems and I will come up with solutions. I said, I have the answers. And, now you may not like to hear the answers, but they're going to be based on the facts at hand, what I think the answers are, or what you need to do next to get to the real root of the problem. But I am not the problem. We are, so with you, George, we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
And I think what we're also discovering through the making of these videos is that when we do hit what we may critically analyze as thinking is an issue, as opposed to a problem, we kind of go, actually, we've learned from that process, and what we'll now do is implement that solution in the next version, but that is good enough for what we need it to do. It does the job at hand, and we're happy enough. We'll take learnings from it, and we'll move on. In other words, it's exactly what the definition was, that it is the inquiry, a starting point to actually look at and address a condition, to investigate, and basically base all those ideas on facts, results and laws. And I think that's a key point. So,
and in someone else's problem lies someone else's opportunity, because that's what business is about. Pay me to solve your problems. Or if there's a problem, there's money. That's the whole way it works. It's where there's shit, there's money. It's the same thing again. It's your problem, but my opportunity. And that's what business is all about. Somebody is going to solve or help you solve that problem if it's not yourself.
And the other thing is to value your worth, because quite often that's what we tend not to do. We give away too much of ourselves when we shouldn't. We have a value, and we need to understand what that value is.
And don't give problems too much weight. Solve them as quick as possible, or realize they're not yours. If someone else's, get them off your plate. If they're big, deal with them early. If they're small, don't let them become the elephant in the room.
Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you as a guest in the next episode.
On the next show.
Bye for now.
That's your problem, not our problem. Take care.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.